Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And as we have been discussing for the past several days, now several weeks, is the state of the war. A war that was once a war of maneuver is now a war of attrition. The side that seems to be on the defensive seems to be able to cause greater amounts of casualties against the opposing force. Now, right now, the Ukrainians are desperately throwing large amounts of forces at the Zaporizhzhia front. That's here running from essentially the Dnieper River east through Orikhiv and then all the way down to Volhodar. And we have word today that Ukrainian forces have launched additional attacks just to the south of Volhodar, attempting to try and at least get past and break through the outermost edges of Russian-controlled territory with the intent of trying to even get down towards the main Russian defensive lines. So what are some of the key weapon systems that are preventing the Ukrainians from moving forward? What technology is allowing the Russians to stop these Ukrainian attempts to break through Russian lines? Well, there's a number of systems. The first system that I think is most important is the ability of the Russians to identify very quickly just where the Ukrainians are attempting to launch these fairly large-scale offensives. Now, once that happens, the Russians are then able to bring to bear a variety of weapon systems that have very good precision and are able to respond very quickly with a high degree of lethality. Now, we have talked about the LMUR tactical missile. That system is being used. It's being used on the Ka-52 attack helicopter, as you can see here. In this specific image, it is not carrying the LMUR long-range tactical missile. It is, at least in this picture, it is not equipped with those weapon systems. But nonetheless, it does have that capability to fire the LMUR, but then it also has the ability to fire other anti-tank guided weapon systems as well. And these systems, these Ka-52 helicopters, which are continuing to be produced by the Russians, along with the Mi-28 and the Mi-24, Mi-35 Hind attack helicopter, upgraded variants of those systems. So these systems are continuing to take a great deal in terms of casualties on the part of the Ukrainians caused by these systems. Another system that is actively being used, if we go back to the deep state map, the Russian artillery is operating tens of kilometers behind this main front line. And then you have the forward observation posts that have the ability to launch lethal attacks against Ukrainian forces. One of those, without even using a weapon system, a forward a Russian observer, has the ability to call in very precise 152 millimeter laser-guided artillery attacks, meaning one shell, one kill, against Ukrainian forces. And that is this system here, the Krasnopol. This system is being used incredibly effectively against Ukrainian forces. So as these Ukrainian brigades, battalion sets, company sets try to move forward and they get caught in these Russian minefields, the Russian forward observer is then able to call in very precise strikes using these laser-guided Krasnopols. They are able to hit metal on metal, meaning this shell has the ability to strike on individual armored vehicles. And the Ukrainians use a similar system called the Excalibur. But when you're in a defensive position and a forward observer has a laser designator with a more advanced optic, and he's able to see these Ukrainian forces as they try to maneuver south, as they try to move south, these forward observation posts, such as this area here, are able to see these Ukrainian units attempting to move, and they call in those Krasnopol artillery shells. Next, as the Ukrainians get closer to Russian lines, then the Russian hunter-killer teams using anti-tank guided weapon systems, such as this, the Kornet, is then used to take out more individual Ukrainian targets. So besides dealing with the Krasnopol, besides dealing with the Kh-52s, launching long-range LMUR missile systems, and they have to deal with these. And these are highly lethal. The Israelis had some trouble with these systems fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Very effective system. And then finally, probably one of the most effective systems that are being used more and more and more is the Lancet, this system. And there are different variants of the Lancet now being used. Now this system is launched 10, 20, 30, 40 kilometers behind the main line of contact. And the Russians now have fully autonomous, driven by artificial intelligence, kamikaze drones that can fly north towards this Zaporizhzhia offensive. They have the ability to self-identify an armored vehicle, a T-64, a BMP-2, a Leopard 2, a Leopard 1, a Challenger, a Bradley, a Stryker, a BTR, an MTLB, whatever the Ukrainians are using. They have the ability, and at times, for the most part, they are also being used with man in the loop, meaning there's an actual operator that has a visual of the through the optic, through the optronics, and then can basically steer the system into a target on the ground. But they are also deployed some with fully autonomous capabilities as well. And these systems are continuing to be produced and deployed by Russian forces. So again, K-52, devastating weapon system being used against the Ukrainians. Lancet, Kornet, and Krasnopol. These systems are proving to be incredibly lethal and very much a thorn in the side of the Ukrainians as they attempt to drive south. And at this point, we don't believe the Ukrainians, as we have talked about this before, are going to achieve a breakthrough. And I haven't even gotten into the use of glide bombs or fixed-wing aircraft that the Russians are using. This is just one segment of systems that are being used by the forward observation posts of the Russians. And this is, again, before the Ukrainians even get to the main Russian defensive belt or defensive lines. They haven't done that yet. The Ukrainians, have not been able to make it through even these forward observation posts to threaten the main Russian line. And again, back to the fact that the Russians have an air force and are actively using that air force. We have seen an uptick in ground strike packages by the Russians using aircraft and helicopters. and obviously that will continue. Our understanding, the intel that we're receiving, is that the Ukrainians are suffering appalling casualties. And there is starting to become a great deal of concern within the leadership of the Ukrainian military, the battalion commanders, company commanders that are asking their soldiers to go forward and essentially die just on the outskirts of Russian lines. And that's what's happening. So again, the defender, obviously, in this conflict has the advantage because of technology. If you're a moving target, you are much more likely to be observed and identified, whereas if you are a non-moving target, camouflaged in a defensive position, a fixed defensive position. And that's where we kind of set for today. Again, as always, a pleasure speaking with everyone. I hope everyone enjoys the content. Please feel free to hit the like. Feel free to go into Patreon or support the channel in any way you would like. And as always, have a good day.